Hey folks, it's Jeremy Kirkland. You're listening to Blammo. How we doing? I'm nearly recovered. I don't know, can you hear it in my voice? Do I sound healthier? I'm nearly recovered from being sick. What do you think of that? I was sick, I'm gonna be honest, like, is something happening? Because I feel like this year, man, I've been sicker this past year. I mean, and I'm talking about 24, 25 than I have ever been since COVID, right? It's wild. I feel like, maybe it's the kid thing. Maybe, I don't know what it is, but I'm sick. But I'm on the mend now. What do you think? Feeling better. It's been a busy week on the pod. We had a few bonus episodes on the Patreon. Some good stuff in there. And your boy is in New York City this week. So a lot of stuff happening. Lots of other traveling coming up. Headed to Tokyo in March, Copenhagen in April. I'm going to be Mr. World Traveler. I'm going to get a little captain's hat. Hello, I'm the World Traveler. How we doing? Not going to the Southern Hemisphere, though. Sorry, folks. No shade, but, I'm not going to be there. Anyway, but I am going to lots of other stuff. Yeah, all right. Are we all hanging in there? Wild week. There's a lot of stuff happening. A bit of a break from the wild industry news and other takes this week, chatting with one of my favorite people on the internet. I'd just say they're one of my favorite people, period. Comedian and writer Robby Slowik. He's written for Jon Stewart, written for Jimmy Fallon. He also writes for himself because he's quite the comedian. He's a friend of the show, knows how to get a fit off, and has kept me laughing my ass off despite, just the insanity that's going around. We chat comedy, clothes, more. Robby Slowik, folks. All right, let's dig in. Here we go. How you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you? I mean, like, we were all crazy sick over the holidays. Like, it was norovirus. Like, I had it. My wife had it. My parents were in town. They got it. My daughter had it. Like, it was awful.
No, and you're good now?
Now we're good, yeah. But it was a rough couple days.
Dude, I think that's the thing that I don't think anyone explains very thoroughly when people have kids. Because it's like, hey, you're going to experience a love that you never knew existed, but you're also going to be sick for about 3 to 4 years straight.
Nonstop, yeah. I mean, she's actually starting daycare for the first time, like, this coming week.
Okay, so get ready.
So I'm, like, mentally preparing for the war zone that it will be. But right, we've been lucky so far. We've had a few, like, cases, but it hasn't been, like, what it's about to be.
Yeah, my daughter was in a daycare in New York, and we didn't know this at the time. And we were living in Fort Greene, and there was this daycare. And for listeners, like, sometimes daycares will just exist in a residential building. And so it was like a building that had like 3 apartments, and they were like, those were the daycare rooms. And we were like, right. Yeah, sure, fine, seems legit. And we're in there, and everything, depending on like the age of your kid, some of it's like just keep your kid alive. Other stuff was find a way to like enrich their mind. And this was keep the kid alive and just stuff them full of fucking animal crackers or goldfish or whatever. So she's there, everything's fine. And one day she gets sick. We're like, man, we don't know what's going on with her. She's, I'm traveling. I'm like, man, well, one of you's got to stay home. My wife and I are like, what do we do? The sickness, we go to the doctor. They're like, well, she's got a fever, do this. And then we're also like one of those families that's like trying to not do antibiotics every second. And so, we're trying to be whatever. Nah, I don't know. This isn't working. Long story short, homie has, she ends up getting salmonella.
Oh, fuck. Yeah.
And she's hospitalized for like 3 days.
Yeah.
And then we find out that the daycare was operating illegally. And so the daycare gets shut down. And then not only does that happen, but the wrath of like all of these other parents are just like, oh, so you're the ones who reported the daycare? And we're like, well, the city did because she got salmonella and they were trying to trace it back. It's not really our, but right. It was awful.
So parents were pissed at you for getting the illegal daycare shut down.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I get it's like, it's so amazingly New York City, I think, where it's just like, I mean, daycare and everything is so expensive that if someone is just like, hey, I have a van, I park it here, I'll watch your kid for $85, I'd be like, yeah, let's discuss this.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. But so your wife works too, right? Because she's a comedian
She's a comedian as well, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So we're like, at the moment I have a writing job. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So when I do, it's like we'll try to do the daycare thing. So that's why. But when I didn't, which I really didn't for like the past year and a half since the strike, I was home. So we were just kind of home with her for like the first 2 years. It was awesome. It was really cool.
But you were doing stand-up,
Doing
right?
stand-up, yeah. So, but that's a nighttime thing, So our days were pretty free.
How much of a grind is that in the sense that like, because I mean, I've seen you're doing stand-up, what, 4 nights a week at least?
At least, yeah. Usually 4 at a minimum, and then as much as 6. But like I kind of like stay around 4 or 5, yeah.
Yeah, and so like, what's that setup in terms of having a kid and doing that when like nighttime is busy?
It's definitely tougher when, my wife is a comic too. So we both have to go out and do shows. And so for the first kind of like, I don't know, 9-10 months, we didn't really have like babysitters or anything yet. So we just kind of take turns. Like whoever booked a spot first, like that became their night. So it's like if she has a spot Tuesday, I do not. And that's just what it was. And we tried to balance that. And then unless like maybe my parents came into town or her dad was in town, then we had some flexibility. But we don't have any family here. So once we started using babysitters, it was a life changer for us.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, let's jump back a bit because like you said you grew up in the UK?
Yeah. I lived in London until I was 7 years old. I was born in South Africa and then very quickly moved to London as like a baby.
Wait, what's going on there?
So my dad is South African. My mom's Israeli. It's like I got the whole like the apartheid triple crown. I'm the big winner. I got it all. But having being a South African citizen in the 80s was not a great great look. So we moved to the UK and got British citizenship.
Oh my God. So what was that? How'd you end up getting here? So you're there till you're 7.
And it was London. We went from Cape Town to London, and then somehow my dad, who is just like a nomadic dude, he can't stay anywhere. He got a 1 year like contract for a job in Tampa, Florida. And so we end up in Tampa for a year. And of all the places we've lived, and my parents are international, my mom was just like, I love Tampa, Florida, So it was just supposed to be a year. And then we left for a year to live in the Cayman Islands and then came back and we're in Tampa for like the next kind of 3 or 4 years. And then we moved again, upstate New York, back to Europe, back to Tampa, the Virgin Islands, back to Tampa. Like I went to three high schools, my first 3 years of high school, 2 middle schools, 3 elementary schools. Like it was a lot.
So where does comedy sort of come in? Because do you get, and I'm curious about this because I went to 2 different high schools and I talk about how that's like one of the craziest things I've ever experienced in my life, just going to 2 different schools. You're going to a bunch of different schools.
Yeah.
What does that do in terms of like forging relationships with people? What's the Friday night look like?
Yeah, I'm lucky because we were in and out of Tampa a lot, and I had a really good core group of friends there that I'm still like friends with to this day, that I kept in contact with. Or I'd be gone for 3 years and come back, and I'd just kind of slot right back in with those folks. So that was really nice. But I had some rough moves, like the move from upstate New York to the Virgin Islands was a fucking rough one. And I went from like, because I had been upstate New York for 2 years, and 8th grade was a really rough transition. No friends that first year, took some time to like make them. And I did. But by the end of 9th grade, I was like, okay, I found my footing. This is a good spot. I've got friends here. I like it here now. And then the rug was just swept out from under me. And it was the Virgin Islands, which is it's not my thing. It's not my vibe. I know people love it. Beautiful beaches, blah, 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 blah. I cannot stand it. I hate it, in fact.
So like a vacation to a beach is not. It's not in the cards.
A vacation I can do. I cannot live there because when you're on a vacation that nothing has to be done on time or in any type of way, it's like, it's very chill. But when you have to live in a vacation environment, like one time I ordered a pizza from Domino's. That was what was there on the island. They showed up at my door 3 hours later with a pizza, and they were like, looked at me like I was insane for being like, well, that took a while. And they're like, whatever. This is you called, we brought a pizza. What more do you want? It makes me crazy.
God. Yeah, like, because I feel like so much of people's like identity, especially where I think we're around the same age. Like for me, I'm like more or less obsessed with nostalgia, where it's like I rewatch, some holiday movies, whatever. Sure. And I was like, oh my God, they don't make movies like this anymore. Like they just don't, everything's got to be a big box office thing. And next thing you know, I'm reading about weird obsessions with, movie studios that get shut down, the fact that movies were made to make money from rental instead of the theater, all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, like basically most of my identity now is some version, some magnification of what I was like as a teenager or like a young teen.
Isn't it weird how quickly you kind of become like your parents without, like I remember I would come home from like school or being out with my friends and my parents would be watching like some movie from the 70s, like Guns of Navarone or, 3 Days of the Condor. And I'm just like, there's new movie. They've made better movies at this point.
Yeah. Jurassic Park's out.
And they just look 1,000 years old to me. And now if I'm at home on the couch alone on a Friday night and I have a remote in my hand, I'm looking for 90s movies or 80s movies that I may have missed to watch. And that's the thing. You start to say, oh, they don't make movies like this anymore. I remember hearing people saying that and being like, what does that even mean? And now I'm like, oh, I get it. They literally do not make these types of movies anymore.
No, financially, they don't make sense.
Yeah.
Which I think is just an absolute like travesty. Like nobody does that in terms of like, I think it's like the 12 to 20 million or $25 million picture is like gone.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a whole other can of worms. Because like I will rewatch House Guest with Phil Hartman.
Phil Hartman and Sinbad.
Yeah,
great movie.
I think one of the best movies of all time. Weird product placement, a lot of McDonald's stuff.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, I literally rewatched it over the holidays. And
it holds up. It holds up. Like the suburban, like the boyfriend who wants to be a rapper type guy, and like all of it really holds up. It's very funny. ST3, yes.
God, it's so fucking good.
Yeah.
So then where does comedy stuff start to come in? I
mean, my whole life, I always love, I was like I was a fan of comedy as a teenager. I was one of those. And, like I think as a little kid, it was like Mel Brooks and that type of stuff, that like kind of
10,000-Year-Old Man or whatever.
That my mom got me into, I think. And then I think the first like stand-up special I saw that I was like, whoa, this is something different. It was Jon Stewart's 1996 special, Unleavened. And I was like, oh my God, this is like, I just connected with it in this way of just like, this is so funny and smart and different and just like silly, which I love, like the kind of balance of smart and silly. And I must have been 13 when that came out. And I just, fell in love with it and was very into stand-up. I would stay up late as a kid to watch like Conan and see the stand-up performances on that, and just Conan being like the funniest guy in the world. And so, but I was pretty I'm like introverted and shy and stuff, so I didn't really get the courage to start doing stand-up till I was about 26. But I would have told you I wanted to do it from the time I was about 15.
26. So what is the catalyst that makes that happen? That's not really the age that people will start. It's usually super early or super late.
Yeah. So I was living in Tampa, Florida, in like kind of like in the worst, graduating into that worst economy ever of like graduating college, and then it's like 2008 and there's no jobs and nothing to do, and I'm just kind of like atrophying.
What'd you go to school for?
I went to school for international relations. I thought I was going to be get a law degree and then go work in like diplomatic State Department type stuff. Like I love that stuff.
Okay.
And I was an international kid. I had this perspective of the world, and but I was also like not a good student. I was fine in college, but like high school, I barely graduated, like barely. I had to go to the University of South Florida because it was the only school that would take me for college. And their application was like, do you have $1,200? You're in, that was what it was. So but the way I started comedy, it's weird. It seemed like such an inaccessible thing. I don't even know how you do it in Tampa, Florida. And then I met a friend of a friend who was the first like self-identified stand-up comic I met. And he was an open micer, but he was like, oh yeah, I was the first person I met who does stand-up. And I was like, oh, I've always thought about doing stand-up. And he like, his name's Errol Johnson, maybe. He doesn't do it anymore, but
hell of a name.
He like almost got like angry. Like he looked at me like angrily and was like, well, just fucking do it then. And I was like, oh, I guess I hadn't considered that. And he was like, just do it. I'll show you where the open mics are. And then he did, and it was like off to the races. The first one I did 45 minutes away from where I live intentionally to be like, I don't want anyone to see me doing this. And first time I just went and watched. And then I like looked at the people and I was like, okay, I can do the, what's going on at the open mic in Palm Harbor, Florida. I think I can hang, So I went a week later, and I told, like, I didn't tell anyone. My girlfriend at the time, she knew, but I was like, please don't come. I don't want like the added pressure of someone I know there. And it turns out that night happened to be like a competition. I didn't know that. And this is my first time ever. So I go and I get like second in this competition.
Whoa.
But also my girlfriend.
How long was your set?
5 minutes.
Okay.
5 minutes. And it's a set I'd probably written like over the course of like years. You know, it's all jokes I've been like holding on to forever in case I ever do stand up. So it was pretty, you know, it was beginner comedy, but it was pretty decently formed, I guess. And my girlfriend, she like snuck in to the back, and of course I saw her. But just a fun little extra tidbit. She showed up there, like she got a ride from her coworker, who is her now husband. So that's who came to watch my first set. My girlfriend at the time and her now husband.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was your like you said beginner comedy or something like that?
Yes.
What do you classify as beginner comedy?
When you're around comedy for a long time, you can really start to like watch people and be like, they've been doing it for 2 years. They've been doing it for 4 years. You hit a point where you can no longer do that, but kind of the first 5 years are like identifiable.
In the sense of their jokes,
in the sense of the jokes, the delivery, the stage presence, but very often, like a lot of people who are not going to be like dirty comics ultimately, are like they start very dirty, or they want to like, you know, it's very common for guys to start and talk about like jacking off and porn, not because it's like low hanging fruit, which it is, but because it's like it's learning to experience being like vulnerable and honest in front of a group of people. You know, it's like, so it seems like juvenile or whatever, but it serves a purpose. It's being like, I'm going to talk about stuff that's embarrassing to me in some ways publicly. And I don't think that's not a conscious choice people make, but it is just like one of the natural progressions that happens.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, a friend of mine was a comic, and he was, I mean, he's no way in hell is he listening to this. He was never very good. But he was like really obsessed with like, I guess now what people would have called alternative comedy.
Sure.
Or whatever. And, you know, like and a lot of it was like, oh, like you saw a bunch of Steve Martin and now you think you can meet Steve Martin. Like he came on with like 10 different shirts. Yeah. You know, and he would take a shirt off like, this is my comedy shirt. This is my second joke shirt. Like stuff that's like kind of dumb. And it's, I mean, I feel bad if that's.
No, I know what you're saying though, but it's also like, I get the idea. It's like conceptually it's funny in its way, but it's like silly is good, but hard to pull off.
Yeah. Because I feel like you have like a comedy persona where, I mean, I've seen one of your things at
Cellar.
Yeah. And then obviously I've, for what I imagine for a lot of other folks, I've seen your like digital sets, you know, and like you have a really, it's not observational, but it is like, at least for me, it's comedy that I felt like you could easily share with other people. And and I mean this in the best possible way, like your joke about, I won't give it away or whatever, I'll put a link to it in the show notes, but your joke about the plastic bags is, I think, arguably one of the funniest fucking things I've ever heard.
Oh, thanks,
because
man.
it comes out of nowhere. It's like, it's so true. It's very much under the radar. And it's not like, like tits and ass sort of thing. Right. And it's also not like super about you. Yeah.
I think like sometimes to a fault, like I think the comedians who ultimately, like for the most part, have the best careers, or like they're very there's a lot of exposition and self-exploration, and they're like, it's very unique to them. And I think that's great. It's just like not my natural inclination. Like I'm much more like, I don't talk about how I like move through the world. I talk about how the world impacts me. You know, it's like, it's a little different. I'm much more outward looking than inward looking.
Did you start that way?
Always. Yeah. Yeah. Because maybe it's one of those things. I don't know. I hate when people get to like into psychology about this, but like I think most of I'm talking, but not you, myself. I just think that like I very early on, comedy for me was used to deflect, and it was used to like deflect getting personal and deflect getting vulnerable. So like my nature is just much more looking outward than inward.
Yeah. Like, did you have any sort of like comedy mentors or stuff? Because obviously you leave Florida.
Yeah.
What happens?
I went to LA actually for the first like 4 years. I went to LA for 4 years and I hated it. I hated it the whole time. But the comedy there was like good, and I made some great friends. I met my current wife there, doing open mics together. But LA was just not the place for me. But I got some. This is what happens when you don't like know people, right? Which is hard. You don't know people who do comedy. Really, it's hard. So I had, through like a friend of a friend of a friend, I got the contact lady. This is so funny. It will sound ancient, but like a lady who used to be like Jay Leno's entertainment attorney or something, you know?
Okay.
And so somehow I got her contact info, and I just like wrote her like, "Hey, I'm a stand up. I'm not looking for like representation or whatever. I'm brand new, but I'm just like, what do you think the differences between LA and New York are?" And so she gave me some advice that was apt. But if I had known myself better at the time, I would have just gone straight to New York. She was essentially like, New York is a place for just stand up. But if you want to like diversify your opportunities to like do stuff in the greater world of comedy, LA makes more sense. And knowing
As in improv?
as in everything, as in writing, improv, acting, whatever. And I was young enough to be like, I don't know exactly what I am or where I see this going. So I chose that's more paths in LA. But if I had to do it again, it would have been like, oh, New York I'm a stand-up through and through, you know?
Yeah. I mean, well, because you are a writer too, right?
Yes, I do write.
Yeah. I mean, where did writing stuff come in?
Honestly, just like submitting packets to stuff, and I finally landed a job. First job I got was with Jon Stewart after The Daily Show. The first thing he did after The Daily Show, which was like an animated thing that we worked on for a year, and it never came out. But to your point about like, I'm not as expositional. I'm not talking about myself. Like, a lot of comics can struggle with writing jobs because they can't write another voice, or they can't write, outside of themselves. And I'm lucky to have the ability where I can write, you can put my, for better or for worse, you could put a lot of my jokes in other people's mouths and they still work.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
It didn't, and no one gave you that insight where it's like, oh, you should write like this, or you should, because I feel like, a lot of comedians where it's like, oh, I started here and then things changed because this person gave me this piece of advice or whatever. And then, by the way, this isn't a comedy podcast, but I love your work so much that like I am, curious about this.
I appreciate that. Yeah, no, it's just, it's kind of a natural thing. And then, when you start, like when I started, people would come up to me very early on and be like, oh, you're such a great writer, which a year or two in, like, was really like, felt like such a sweet compliment. And then at 4 or 5 years in, when they're like, oh, you're such a good writer, like, then it starts to be like, what you're saying is I'm not a good performer. Like I like, that used to be a compliment and now it's starting to annoy me. And then at a certain point you learn how to like perform and catch up. But like, there are some people who, they can't write a joke, they can't tell a joke, but they're just they're fucking funny. They go up on stage and they have an inherent funniness to them.
Is there an example of a person you think like maybe past or something,
Yeah, who is like that? You know what? Like, I think that honestly, like the king of this example is Adam Sandler.
Oh,
like, if you watch his like not the newest one, I haven't watched it yet, but the one from like a year or 2 years ago, he's just like, he says stuff that it's like you cannot follow the logic of it. It doesn't make sense. It comes out of nowhere, and it's just funny. There's just like, it's inexplicably funny. And then there's like guys like me who like, I have a way about me and I'm funny, but it's like, it is the jokes are the thing.
Right. Yeah. And then when did you start because I to talk about some of the clothing stuff, I feel like, and maybe I'm totally wrong, so obviously correct me, but like you always got good fits on stage. And I'm curious how much of this stuff, because I've talked to a handful of comedians that are like, I don't know, I just fucking wear what I wear. And other people are like, no, like this is going to go online or this is going to go on this. And like, I'm curious about that.
I can give you this whole like rundown of like, because I made a big, like probably about, I don't know, 12 years ago, I made a big life change, like as far as clothes go, but it took me a while to kind of figure it out and find my thing. But when I started comedy, I had this dumb idea of like, I don't want the audience to have any preconceptions about me when I get up there. I want to be a blank slate. So I just dress in the most like mundane way possible. And weirdly, like in some ways that became the style, but in like, I was wearing in 2010, like jeans that were too loose for 2010. New Balance shoes, which were not popular in 2010, and like a hoodie. I was just the most like blank slate of a white dude out there. And I have a friend back in Tampa, like my best friend growing up, this guy, John B. I was hanging out with him and his wife, and he was very stylish, like way ahead of the curve. He had his own thing. It's like not my style, but it's definitely like, he's a guy in Tampa, Florida who would go buy women's jeans at Diesel because he liked the fit. Like he had like, he had like a real like style to him. And his wife was like, she said to me, she's like, you don't dress badly. You just dress like a boyfriend who's given up.
Ouch.
And that landed like a fucking ton of bricks on me because it was true. It was like there was little thought or effort into anything. So I started to put like some thought and effort, but that was like, it was kind of like the basic, like, okay, I'll get I still wasn't making a ton of money or whatever. And so like, but I'll get the Levi's 511s. Like I like that cut and some like, whatever, I was still probably wearing like just regular t-shirts, some button downs or whatever. I didn't quite have it figured out. And then I would never wear anything with a visible logo, no words or no writing. And I did that for honestly until about 2021. So probably 10 years where you would never see a word on me, a graphic, nothing.
That's a good point.
And then I hit a wall and I'm just like, I don't want to look like this anymore. And I just I just swung crazy for a year into this like streetwear world where not even streetwear, but like Graham's like only NY and Belief and like, and so everything's got like big like graphics and words and long sleeve shirts with words down the sleeves. It looks like I'm a billboard. I look like kind of ridiculous, but I just had to break the cycle of what I was doing. And then when I worked for Jon Stewart the second time, so this is like 2020.
Because this is the new Daily Show.
This was the problem with Jon Stewart on Apple TV Plus.
Yeah, sorry,
before the Daily Show, and no one saw it. No one knows it exists.
Well, let me just pause for a minute. I thought the problem with Jon Stewart was an excellent show.
I appreciate that.
And I think Yasser's wife, she was the showrunner, I think, at the time.
She was the head writer for the first year. Yeah, and she was awesome.
I mean, it was a very, very, very good show. A show I would argue is probably like a little bit too ahead of its time. I think it's going to be, people are going to revisit it for, I think, how, not only...
Wait a second. I got to get my bids in on the Bezel app, but more on that in a minute. I get all sorts of emails and questions from you all, which I love to read and respond. And one thing I constantly get, and even read in the Blamo Slack, is what watch should I buy and where should I get it? It's a wild world out there with all sorts of websites and shops, but I go to Bezel. Bezel is the trusted marketplace for buying and selling your next luxury watch with expert in-house authentication on every purchase. First off, folks, it's getbezel.com. That's getbezel.com. But I use and recommend Bezel because it's the best of both worlds. You can go to the site and browse a marketplace of luxury watches, over 16,000 of them, by the way, which is a lot. And I know that Bezel is going to authenticate your purchase. Or you can create an account and get connected with your own private client advisor, called the concierge. Because look, making a watch purchase can be confusing, especially when you don't know all the reference numbers. When was this made? Did they use ceramic then? Is it a triple lop, dingle dop? What the heck? I don't even know. But they do at Bezel, and they're here to help. Concierge, baby. Look, if looking for your watch to mark a special occasion, or maybe you're just doing research, right? They even have their own journal where you can learn all the ins and outs about Bezel and the brands and all the stuff that's happening right now. But back to my bids. Yes, Bezel now has auctions, and not just any auctions. They got Rolex, they got Cartier, they got Audemars Piguet, all the big dogs and more. So you can discover, bid, and know the Bezel team has got your back with verified in-house authentication. So visit getbezel.com on your smartphone or computer. Bezel, the trusted marketplace for buying or selling your next luxury watch.
Daily Show for me was very comedic, and you'd laugh, and then you'd walk away later and you'd be like, oh yeah, you know what, that's kind of a good point. This I felt like was the inverse, and which is like, oh shit, like all these things are so important. It's like, this is so much easier for me to digest this because there's like a humorous undertone. It's still, I think it's one of the best shows. Yeah, I
was very proud of it. I was very proud to be working on it, and it's to be asked again to work with Jon, because after the first time and that thing didn't work out, I was like, well, that was it. Like I had my shot to work with one of my heroes, and he was a great guy, but it didn't work out, and so to be like asked back was huge for me.
Did you tell him that like he was the comedian that got you into it?
No, I don't
Is that a little too fancy?
think so, but I definitely like I would be like kind of fan like the first job that I had with him it was fucking amazing because it was that we were figuring out this new technology, and so there was like it was a tiny staff, and there was 6 writers and John, and then like 20 animators, and for the first like 3 months we just worked on a farmhouse that he owns where he has a sanctuary. So we worked there, and it was like. So people who worked at the Daily Show with John, like they would, if you're not in the very inner sanctum, like you see him for minutes here and there, and that's kind of it. We would spend hours together in a small room. And I was like very unabashedly, I was shameless about being like, what happened with you and Marin? Like I would just start like asking all of these questions. And he was very like forthright about answering them.
Wow.
So I was basically like hosting a Jon Stewart fan podcast, like that was never being recorded, but getting all these like amazing stories and stuff.
Oh my God.
But now I was never like you were my so I just that I never feel like people really know how to like internalize that. They're just kind of like, okay, thanks. So I just don't bother.
So let's get to work now.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so sorry.
Oh, right.
Continue.
So I get this job, and I'm like overdoing it on like the streetwear or whatever. And right around this time, one of the guys I'm working with, Rob Christensen, you might know him. I don't know. He's a writer, but he's got also a very like specific sense of style. He's like he's a Brooklyn guy. He's blue collar like through and through. That's just his name. In fact, he was like while he was doing stand up, he was a set dresser. So he's a guy with a hammer hanging shit up on the wall, like carpentry and like So he's wearing kind of like that hybrid like workwear streetwear thing, and he's pretty big into streetwear too. And then I'm sure you remember this. Seinfeld did that thing for Kith, right?
Yeah.
And Rob. This was like equal to the time where my friend's wife was like, you dress like a boyfriend who's given up. Rob, he's got this thick Brooklyn accent, and I can't even do it, but he's like, streetwear's dead. I'm not going to dress like Jerry Seinfeld,
Yeah.
And I was like, you're absolutely right. And then the both of us got into, I guess what you might call like heritage wear, which is like almost everything I wear now is either made in the USA or Japan, or Western Europe, but like mostly USA and Japan. Everything is made with like intention. I weirdly like you start to know the history of the stuff you're wearing, or like what mill the denim came from.
Okay.
And I love having that connection to this stuff. I also love knowing that it's like I'm lucky now when I have a writing job, I can afford to make these choices. But I can afford to buy stuff that I know there's no like weird slave labor in the equation. It's being made by oftentimes union workers or people who are at least getting a living wage, and I can do that now. So I choose to do that.
So wait, what are the brands? Because like I'll to jump back, like you like wearing like brands like Only and Y and stuff like that was kind of a head brand. I don't think that was like that's like I went to High Snobiety and I was looking through stuff brand. Like, so meanwhile, are you kind of going on this sort of like digital journey for some of these things? And like
a lot of it I'm finding like a little bit, but then I start to find like the spots in New York City that like sell this stuff, Standard and Strange and like Self Edge and all these places. And when I travel, I also love to like, it's really funny. I'll be, Mersby Schwanen or whatever.
Yeah, I'm
like
wearing one of their sweaters. Like,
they're
coincidentally.
great. I wear their stuff all the time, but it's like, I find myself and like, oh, I'm in Europe. This is where this stuff is from. And I find the store and it's like, wherever I am in the world, I tend to walk into stores filled with guys who look exactly like me and are dressed exactly like me and be like, oh, we could do this anywhere in the world. And then you start to talk about your fucking jeans or whatever. It's kind of, I never saw myself being this guy, but I love it.
To jump on the Seinfeld thing, why do you think that Seinfeld is a muse for people that want to get dressed, but they, like you were saying, they don't want to look like Seinfeld? Because I totally agree.
Yeah. Seinfeld, I will. It's funny. It's one of those shows where you go like, are you a Seinfeld fan of the show and stuff?
I'm a fan of the show. I'm not necessarily a fan of him.
Yeah, that's I think a lot of people's take. And the show is amazing, but like the fashion on that show is kind of bizarre in that like it like exists outside of time. No one is really in any type of no one really like dressed the way they dress on this show, except Jerry kind of was always worn like big doofy white sneakers and jeans that are maybe a little too like tight for the frame, like, and a shirt that's too big. Like that's just what Jerry wears. But now Kramer's style is kind of become like what my summer style is. You know, it's like it's a camp collar button down over like a wife beater with some like kind of like linen Italian-y style pants. Like that's how I dress in the summer. And so Kramer fashion really kind of I don't know, it's seeped into all of our collective consciousness.
Yeah, no, I mean you're right, but it was funny because the Kith really felt like a jump the shark moment.
It did, right? Because it was just, first of all, Jerry in that, he looks pretty good. He does pretty good.
He's aged well. I mean, you should, when you're that wealthy, you probably have pretty controlled diet and intake, and you know, I'll respect on that front. Sure.
I mean, we showed the photo shoot because I was working for John at the time. We showed it to John, and John was like, this makes me feel terrible. Like how good he looks makes me feel bad. Yeah,
Jon Stewart's aged really well.
He looks great. Yeah, but he's very like he's self-deprecating in a very accessible way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's just something about like, you know, Jerry Seinfeld is very talented and very funny. He's not cool. Like he's just not cool, and he's not meant to be cool.
Right.
You know, he in the best way for a comedian exists outside of that spectrum. You know, he's to the side of nerdy or cool or whatever. He's just a weird outsider alien who observes things that are cool and not cool, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting because like, so I talked to Mark Maron once, and Maron is like a huge Ironheart fan. He loves it's like, it's very heritage stuff. Like Maron loves Self-Edge. He loves, you know, like, but I was talking to Maron, and I was like, oh, you know, I was like, you're kind of into fashion. And he got really miffed by it because he was just like, yeah, no one gives me credit for how good of a dresser I am. And I was like, well, can we like, you know, and I was like, oh, really? Like, what do you mean? And he's like, yeah, he's like, you know, people have been talking about, he's like, you know, everyone talks about like Jerry Seinfeld's a good dresser. He's like, I've been wearing like Japanese denim that like people hadn't heard about for ages, and no one gave me credit on it. And I was like, that's a good point. I was like, I kind of wonder why. But in a weird way, I'm like, well, maybe it's because he wanted it. I don't know.
I mean, that's just such a, like, that's the most Maron reaction I could imagine. Like, that's so, he's always been the same guy. So to be like, to take you, I like the way you dress and spin it into, but why doesn't the world notice is like, that's the most Maron thing I've ever heard. But yeah, I get it. You know, I don't know. He has always had a style. Maron is a guy who is he's very conscious of his choices, I think, that way, and always has been. Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of like, I've always loved, you know, there's the director Fitz account, but I'm like, man, there needs to be like more of like comedian Fitz account, because there's, you know, I mean, and I know you're friends with Jay Jordan, you know, like I think he's got good style too. I mean, he's always trying to, you know, and I think it's what works for him. I don't know if I would wear all of Jay's fits. I'm also not like jacked like him.
Yeah.
So there's a level that I can't really pull off. But I think like that stuff is so interesting to me because, you know, especially where it's like, who was it that I was talking to, that there was a comedian. He was like, well, first off, he's like, you know, the first 5 or 6 seconds of whatever joke you're going to hear from me is going to be on mute with captions.
Right.
So you're going to look at, you know, what my fit is and what this. And I was like, oh, that's a really good point. But like, so you get into, to jump back on track here, you abandoned streetwear, and what were the brands that you were like getting into?
So then when it was like when I moved into like the kind of heritage wear space, like a lot of like New York based stuff, like Left Field, I really like.
Left Field's really good.
Left Field's great. I wear like Free Note cloth, a lot of their stuff. Devium, which is like a small California brand there that I only found their stuff online, but they make everything in the USA. In fact, this is a Devium like flannel I'm wearing.
The flannel looks really nice. Nice pattern.
It's Devium, American Giant. I grab, like, I basically have this like American Giant Henley in every color they make it in, and every time they make a new color, I buy it. All their stuff's made in America. It's all great stuff. And then a bunch of Japanese stuff, Orslo, UES. I have like my UES Traveler shirt is like my favorite piece of clothing that I own.
UES.
It's a Japanese brand, and it's always like small batch stuff, but check them out. It's great. It's really good stuff.
Have you been to Japan?
No, outside of a layover in Tokyo, no, but it's on my list. In fact, I'm trying to like organize some shows there now.
Oh, you got to do it. One, because I think I don't know any other culture that is so revered of just in a weird way. Like so much of Japan I would say they're not an individualist society, like to be more diplomatic, right? It's everything is a collective, but they truly, truly love individuals who express their own art form, from jazz music to obviously stand-up comedy. And what's cool, like, I don't know if people like listeners will understand this, like, you go there and you perform in English and they're like, right on.
Yeah. I've heard there's a pretty cool like club in Tokyo that's been doing English language stuff, and I'm kind of just fascinated by Japan. I've traveled so much, and like Japan is just I've never managed to get there. So I'm hoping to get there this year.
Yeah, I was there last year. I'll be there hopefully again this year in March. And it's like I've just never been in a place that's so weirdly orderly yet like chaotic at the same time. Like everything, like the best example is like I went to this burger place, right? Whatever. And I get a burger and I'm sitting with a friend of mine and he's like, and I take the burger out of the wrapper, I start eating it. And he's like, dude, look at the wrapper. And he's like, look around the room. And what I didn't realize is the wrapper was perfectly designed and engineered that you unwrap it and the burger stays within that wrapper. So you can eat everything and not get anything on your hands. And I was like, what the like everything is just so thought through. The fucking burger wrapper.
It's really amazing. It's really amazing the level. There's also when you like travel a lot, sometimes you realize the chaos of America, like stuff that it rolls off your shoulders. You're just used to it because you're in it. But then you see the way some things are done other places and you're like, oh, okay, we're insane. We're crazy here. Yeah.
Like there's like a halal cart in Tokyo that is supposed to be inspired by, the local New York street carts where he brings in the hot sauce. He has cans of soda, there's, and one of the things that I was talking to him is, he was like, oh yeah, sometimes I get people's order wrong because like a lot of times you don't get the right order in America. And like, so that's like a lucky thing where it's like, oh, they fucked up my order.
That's
like,
so funny. That's insane. That's so funny that like they do it for fun. It's just like, oh, it's silly, just like America. We were bad at our job. Yeah.
But the clothing stuff there is insane. I mean, it's also weird because like people are walking around wearing like not the classic salaryman outfit, which is basically like a black suit, but like there are people there walking around wearing, furry hats and it's not like Pokemon stuff, but it's just like whatever it is, fill in the blank. Yeah. Super bizarro levels of expression, which is great. And no one bats an eye. People are like, oh yeah, like there goes that person dressed like this. There goes this. And totally not a big deal. And there's a shop for every single type of thing. I don't know.
It's really good. I mean, it's cool how like into the like kind of American heritage wear they are, and that they're making this stuff that is like just such high quality, like great stuff it's an adopted style, right? It's not like a natural style to them, but they just like make the most amazing stuff. I guess Japan has that reputation of like taking stuff from other places and elevating it into their own style. And they really do that with clothing.
W. David Marks, who's like a buddy of mine, he was on this podcast. He talks about like one of the reasons why, Japanese folks are so obsessed with like crafts and artisanal craftsmanship is that way, way, way back, and I'm butchering his quote. I think he talks about it in Amatora, but is that for us in America, you would have the maker and then the like merchant, and the maker is usually below the merchant in this like level of, unspoken class. And in Japan, it's completely inverted. There's way more admiration on the maker than the merchant, because like the merchant is like, well, like that's not that hard. Anyone can just like sell stuff, or anyone can do that, but like to truly make something like with your hands, or to design clothes, or to make the garment, or, it's so much more revered that it's kind of like ingrained in their society. But I've always like thought about that because I don't think we,
Yeah. At a certain point, when things start to become like that type of like novelty collector's item, like I start to get out on it. I'm just like, I don't know what we're doing here. Like I like stuff that's made with quality. I like stuff that's made with intention. I like to look good, but like I'm not collecting art in my mind. What's that? I do have a few things from what's that English? Oh God, the English company that like they do like they'll make like we only made like 200 of this jacket or whatever, and but the prices are kind of reasonable. But it's usually made in either England or Portugal, and it's
well, okay. So you get into these brands, you're into this other stuff. What are your thoughts on this kind of like big fit thing that's happening now, where people are just wearing like clothes that are really, really big, intentionally?
It's funny because I'm trying to like a little, not like move with the cheese, so to speak, like a little bit. Like, so I picked up a pair of like, it's funny how it's circular. Like I picked up like a pair of Knickerbocker jeans that are like
great brand.
Yeah, I really like their stuff. All made in Portugal. And that's like it's the first jeans I've had in like 10 years that are like, they are baggier, like.
Yeah,
they're not like they're not like Jinko wide legs, but they're just like, first of all, I forgot how comfortable like a baggier jean is, but I'm still getting used to the sight of myself in them. When I look down and see that like excess fabric, and it just so I don't know. I'm not gonna. I would never go like wide, like some people are doing now. I think I'm also like just an age and a period where it's like you get to kind of settle into a timeless style that you don't want to swing too far in any direction. I like the idea that if you take a picture of me, you and it's just me with nothing in the background, like you really couldn't tell if that was taken in like anywhere from the 1980s to hopefully the 2040s, where things are kind of timeless in their nature.
Wait, where did you get that idea?
I know. I just thought of it.
Yeah, I feel like, for me, that's always like my biggest issue with getting dressed is because I'll be like, oh man, I'm into this brand and I'm like way into it. And then I'll get into another brand, get way into it. And then it's like, you can kind of just find a photo of me and you can be like, oh, that was that year. That was that year.
Yeah.
It sucks. It's fucking embarrassing as hell, man. I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah, but it's also like, that is life. Like you just find like, you need to be excited about. So people can get excited about whatever their thing is. I've had this argument with someone where someone was trying to tell me that like reading War and Peace is most people they're going to take the other person's side, but like reading War and Peace is so much more enriching and better than fucking watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians. But to me, it's all the same. It's all just like, we are looking for something that speaks to us, that entertains us, that helps us pass the time, that we can get invested in. And they're equivalent things to me. Maybe one is this masterful work of art, but like either way, they're both gripping to people. They both get invested in the characters and the stories, and that's it. We're just passing time, and so getting into like the different brand or whatever, being like, I'm very excited about this. It's great. And it's normal to be like, I'm less excited about it now. And now here's something else to be excited to feel something,
Yeah, that's an extremely like valid and level-headed take, because I think, especially with a book like War and Peace, that's a book people read because they're trying to say something.
Sure. Yeah, totally.
And you don't really watch Kardashians because you're trying to say something. It's because you want to have something said to you. And I'm not even trying to get too freaking like existential here, but I think that's for me, like hearing that goes to show that like you're just much more of a confident individual than I am.
Oh, I don't know about that, but I don't know. Maybe it's like maybe I swing just too close to like nihilism of like, oh, it's kind of everything is nothing. So, but I don't necessarily feel that way, but I do just feel like you get you're here for however many years you're here, and you should just fucking enjoy the things that you enjoy, and you're not like better than someone because the thing you enjoy is fancy literature, and you're not worse than someone because the thing you enjoy is schlock entertainment. You're both just people like burning a few hours and discussing this shit with your friends.
Yeah, very true. So you're a dad. You've been a dad for a year now?
20 months.
Okay. Yeah. What has fatherhood done to your style and clothes?
Well, when I'm like home in the day with Goldie, it's my style is something I don't mind getting covered in food, or markers or whatever. It's really like it's like the nice thing is when you leave the house I feel like, oh, I'm getting dressed and going somewhere. But when I'm at home, like I'm at home now, the second this is done, I'm going to take off this flannel because she will, who knows what she'll do to it,
Yeah.
So you never really get to be like dressed nicely around the house when you've got a young kid at the house.
Yeah, I know. It really messed with a lot of my style and made me more interested in like things that were washable. Like I worked for a suit like store and company for a long time. And I was like, fuck it, man. I'm going to be like Don Draper. I'm just going to wear suits all the time. And then like Don Draper was like kind of a shitty dad.
He was
And
shitty everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if he was really like getting on the floor with his kids and like partying and doing stuff. And yeah, like I think about that a ton, but at least you're in New York, you have like a runway, like you're going out and you're around other people. So you can kind of, I'm in the suburbs now in the fucking middle of America.
Where are you now?
Well, so I'm in New York once a month, but like I, live in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
Now, we moved here during the pandemic, and whatever. And that was kind of the thing that we did. But yeah, it's nice. Like, I don't know, I have a house and an office, but like.
That is awesome. Is there like a noticeably different style in somewhere like St. Louis from like the coasts?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think so much stuff is, I think people underestimate the importance of like local retail. And even though we're in this era of you can basically get whatever you want online, like I can get Louis Vuitton stuff sent to my house, but like you still don't get that experience. And I think in a lot of ways that experience informs what else you want. I think a lot of people here, and it's funny because there are people that live in the Midwest that will DM me and be like, hey dude, can you not rag on the Midwest? And I'm gonna be very clear. Like, I don't think people here dress bad. Yeah. I think people here dress fine, but there's also, it's just a totally different pool where it's like the people here, you are wearing like Lululemon, you're wearing golf clothes. I will say I completely, and every other brand and company, completely overlooks how much money is here. And it's why you have brands like Travis Matthew, which is like a golf brand that does like $200 million in sales every year.
Heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And like Peter Millar and all this stuff. So a lot of the guys here wearing, they're wearing like synthetic, like tighter pants.
Country club athleisure, elevated athleisure country club style or something.
And a gajillion pairs of On Running and Hoka.
Yeah.
Like everyone's got that. That's how you flex. You get out of your Tesla or your X5 in the carpool line and you're wearing On Running. You're wearing a Peter Millar vest, or you're wearing some sort of golf course that's like exclusive that you can't get on.
God, that sounds miserable to me.
It is. It is.
But it is interesting, like how like regional. Look, we live in like a bit of a, like the monoculture is dead, but you also simultaneously have access to everything, everything everywhere all at once. So like these regional styles can go anywhere now through Instagram, and you can like share. People in England might have the same sense of style as American streetwear people or whatever, because everything is global. But there's still this regional thing. Like where I grew up in Florida, people still, are wearing, Guy Harvey shirts. That's like a picture, like a fishing art. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're still wearing like Guy Harvey shirts, Costa Del Mar sunglasses, and like khaki shorts. And that's still a belt with like a, fish embroidered onto it. Like
needlepoint. Yep.
Yeah. And then some like whatever rainbow sandals. And that's like still the uniform down there.
Yeah, it's definitely messed with me. And I've seen, I've lived here for 4 years now. And even though like I will go to New York or LA or whatever, I'm realizing that I'm getting influenced by my life and my age now in terms of how I dress, where I'm like, you know what? Like, fuck it. I'm going to just wear some like, the default becomes like Ralph Lauren, which the younger, like, I want to be more informed. I think that I'm on this elevated plane. It's gone. Yeah. Like right now it's like, yeah, fuck it. You just wear like some pants from Polo. I
fully get that and understand it as well. Cause it is like, there's still a level of intention behind that based on your circumstances, but it is like, to kind of keep it going every day when dealing with the kids and other life stuff, it's hard. You mentioned, I just wanted to ask you a question. Like you mentioned, like you just said offhandedly, like you get like Louis Vuitton sent here, but like, what do you like, it's very interesting. Like those brands that were the ones so like vaunted, and like rare and special, they all just seem like they're owned by major conglomerates now. And they're kind of like shopping mall stores. Like if you go to like a high end mall, which wherever those still exist, like it is like Louis Vuitton and Gucci and Prada. And it's like, what has happened to the quality of those brands? I don't feel like, because I feel like they're unjustifiably expensive for not some type of, artisan made quality like it once was.
Well, it's a loaded answer here, so bear with me. But there's two things that happen. One is luxury. How much wealth has grown, and the disparity of basically the wealthier people have gotten so much wealthy, so much more wealthy, that there is a much bigger gap in between people that have stuff, right? Like so much of wealth in general is like you kind of get things that the other people can't have. Well, what do you do when, now 40% of your circle or 60% of your circle can afford Louis Vuitton?
Yeah.
So you have to, one, find something else to outclass them. And then also, like, all those brands are way, 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 way bigger now in terms of just market cap, in terms of their reach. And a lot of it has been because they've doubled down on physical retail. Like, you go to, like, especially if you're in the Midwest, the places to get like the dope stuff, like our high end stuff, it's all malls. Like Westfield malls, like those places like still print money. They're just in specific areas. It's like, especially if you're in California, like you go to like the Stanford Shopping Center in Palo Alto. I mean, it's just absurd levels of wealth. And you have like, in Hermes, and people are going there and they're like buying Apple Watch bands, and they're buying plates and mugs for $600 each. And then they're getting Louis Vuitton bags. But like, they're not buying, if it's Hermes, you're probably buying quality. But even then, I would say 90% of that audience is there because they want to buy something that's Hermes. And they want to say that, like, I'm getting this because I'm this level of luxury. I'm this, this is how I'm separating myself from the common folks. And I think, like, in so many ways, how we dress, like, that is, we want to express ourselves to other people, but we also do want to maybe have this, I don't know what the right word is, but like, what would you say when it's like you want to communicate something, but like not say it? I don't know.
Yeah. You want to convey,
you want to express, like, tell people that, like, it's the same reason, like, why people would wear like a really nice watch.
Sure.
Like this, only, like, I have a Rolex Daytona, and it's like, it's a super hard to get watch. And the fact that I got it for retail is even more of a flex, because you're like, like, you can't even get this, it's not even a money thing. And I think, like, that's probably the most heartbreaking thing about, like, clothes and getting dressed, is there's less of a discovery of, like, who you are and more of a way to just, like, separate yourself from someone else. Yeah. And I think, like, that is, because people will ask me, it's like, well, podcast about clothes and I'm like, what, fucking listen to the show. Like, it's barely about clothes, but it's like so much of how we want to communicate ourselves is going to be through what we wear. But like, for me, and it sounds similar to you, not to project to you, I've learned more about myself by trying to wear different brands and trying to figure out who I am through my clothes than I have on, like, trying to communicate to my neighbor that I am some level of success or whatever. Like, that's never my thought process.
Right.
Or else, like, I wouldn't wear Japanese brands, like, because no one fucking knows that I'm wearing graph paper.
Exactly. Yeah. No one knows. And then you carry that with you, and then you explode like Marin 20 years later, where you're like, oh, this was milled in Osaka, but like,
yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
What about you? Like, do you have any, you are at a level of success now. So you're writing for Jimmy Fallon now. That's a pretty difficult to get job, I would argue. And it comes with its own level of perks and benefits and stuff. So you're at a level of success that it's a little bit easier for you to get stuff that maybe you once, like, really aspired towards. Has that changed what you want to get? Where you're like, I want to get the I Made It brand or the I Made It clothes?
No, thankfully it hasn't. But it has, like, it does make me double down on the, like, let me just remove, like, shitty labor practices from my stuff. And I understand that, like, the majority of people, you really can't just drop $200 on a shirt for that reason. That's a lot of money for a button down shirt, know? But it feels good to be like, I kind of know the story of this shirt. I know, like, where it was made, by what small company, that, like, where the fabric is from. It just makes you feel like, more connected to it. And I like the intention behind that. But I really, in general, I dislike whenever, like, money is used as a tool to kind of self-separate and segregate. Like, for our first, like, week, my first week working at Fallon, like, they took the writers out to drinks, and, like, it was, I can't even remember the name of the hotel, but it was at a hotel bar where the cocktails were, they were like, I'm not joking, they were $55. Like, an old fashioned was $55 American dollars.
Did you go to Bemelman's?
I've been to Bemelman's, but it was not Bemelman's. It was, I don't know. I will find out and
Yeah.
tell you. But it was like, and we walk in, and we have a reservation because we're with the Tonight Show. Like the guy, like looking at me, I got there a little earlier with one other like writer, and the door guy was like, "You guys are in the wrong place," you know. But because we had the reservation, we go up, and the first thing I see when I walk in is Steve Carell, sitting there with his wife grabbing a drink. And it's like, oh, right. Because it's the only thing that makes this drink $55 is the fact that you can only be here if you can buy a $55 drink. It's not about the ingredients or the quality. It's simply about Steve Carell can come here and sit quietly and have a drink, and no one is going to bother him because they all know the unspoken rules of the place where a drink costs $60 fucking dollars.
Yeah, what do you tip on a $55 drink?
Dude, I'm so happy that they were joking like, oh, the new writer's going to have to pick up the tab, but it's like that would set me back 3 years.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, Pebble Bar is a great bar, and that's not $55 drinks. Yeah. That's right next to there. I mean, there's tons of 30 Rock folks that are in there. I don't know. That's fucking hell, man. $55.
Yes, it's great. Like there's bizarre prices, but you're like, okay, you guys are here because you like that the money that you're willing to spend will separate you from the masses in some type of way. And I don't know. I get a gross feeling from that.
It's very, very strange. And I feel like as I've like gotten to meet other people who are different levels of success, the only thing that unites everyone is people are still worried about their fit. Like they're still worried about someone perceiving something that they're not trying to convey. Where it's like, I don't want you to think I'm that successful. Or because a person that I talked to who's fairly well off, they were like, oh, the biggest thing is like people want you to do well, but never better than them.
Interesting. I don't know if that's true. In fact, a lot of times people love to, like, depending on the type of person you are and they are, like, people like to have a hero. People like to have
I agree.
Something to aspire to or look up to, or they root for someone, and as someone gets like successful, they don't
feel part of the journey.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's like, I just think different people obviously process differently, but I think there's just as many people who are like happy for someone's success and aspire to it as the people who are like, fuck you for doing better than me.
So like Mark Zuckerberg wears watches now that are $200,000-$300,000.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, this fucking guy, he's dressing like a rich guy. He's been a rich dude for like 20 years.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know why people care all of a sudden.
I don't, right, because he's being intentional now, and it bothers people because they know him as one thing. People don't like when someone changes. I think they know him as a tech nerd, and now to see him kind of like trying to like flex, like he's in shape, he's doing MMA. He's like, I think it annoys people because it feels like, okay, you can't do it all. Like,
yeah,
Bill Gates was never trying to be cool, and they knew he was rich and a this and that, but like he never was like, and now I do MMA. There is something that I get why it irks people, but yeah, also who gives a shit?
Yeah, it's so strange. I definitely have a lot of head scratching moments with stuff like that, but I don't know. I mean, that's probably why I just do what I do.
It's also nice to know though, and it's like these people who seem like the most confident people on earth, and that's by design, are oftentimes like the most insecure, deeply, deeply insecure. Yeah, a lot of these people you meet, they're just like looking for constant reassurance, and part of what makes like some stars is they have this natural immediate vulnerability with strangers of like, so it's the biggest star in the world, and they come off stage and they'll ask fucking someone who's a no one to them. It's just like, how do you think that went? Do you think, and it makes you connect with them because you're like, oh, I just told, Adam Levine that I just reassured him that his, show was good. And it's like captivating in some weird way. You're like, oh, this person, they look to me for reassurance.
Yeah. I basically just like went off on like 5 minutes straight to Ben Stiller about how much I love heavyweights.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first couple minutes, I could tell he was like, are you making fun of me?
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, arguably, no. I mean, I've said the same. I've gotten to talk to Apatow, Feig, and I'm like, dude, Heavyweight's fucking masterpiece of a film. And most people are like, what?
Yeah.
And he was just like, oh, so you really genuinely enjoy. I was like, dude, I had that shit pre-ordered on Blu-ray when it came out. I'm like, I got all these, like, it's just like dumb shit. But it's interesting because he's like, oh, okay, oh, great, yeah, thanks. And of course it was a fucking dumb thing for me to do, but like, I don't know.
No, it's so hard not to. It's like, it makes a difference to you. You want to, someone once gave me the like advice of like, do what you would do, like interact with someone the way you would interact with them, because that's the way you interact with a friend, like regardless of what their response is going to be. Like if it's a famous person who you're friends with or whatever, and like you can send them the whatever text, and then don't be worried about their response, but don't be like, oh, I don't want to just be another guy in the chorus of that was great or whatever. Just do what you would ordinarily do, and they'll do what they do in response.
That's fair.
Yeah.
True. Do you see yourself always having to do stand up, or like keeping yourself in that role as a way to give yourself like a release from what you're doing? Or is the plan to like make a film or write something? Or I don't know.
I'm working right now with someone to sell a show, so that is like in the works. And I look at like the writing jobs as just kind of a way to like, that's the health insurance and the pay the bills and buy some fancy clothes I wouldn't otherwise be able to get. But stand up is still the thing. It's the core thing that drives me. It's the thing that I think about the most. It's the fun thing, and it's the way to best express myself. And when you're writing for other people, you're not expressing yourself. You're doing a job. You're helping someone else bring their voice and thoughts to life. And it's a cool challenge and fun, especially if you're working for someone who you like what their thoughts are. But it is definitely not as fulfilling as saying what you want to say in the way you want to say it directly to people.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I always wonder, like, if you work if your outlet is also something that is tapping your creative field, like, does it deplete you?
No, because it's different muscles. And oftentimes, especially working the Tonight Show, right? It's like Jimmy prefers a broader joke that can hit with the most amount of people, and he doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But when I have prompts, I will write those jokes for Jimmy, but I'll also just write the ones I would naturally write for myself that might be a little edgier or take a bit of a darker turn, and I'll hand those in. But of course, they're not going to get used. But then it's like, oh, I can take some of these back. I can find a place. Yeah, they're never going anywhere. I'll find a way to just repurpose it, because they're not. You turn in your stuff for the day, it's dead the next day. So if there's this stuff that's like clearly, like I'm like, this is a dumb joke, but it came out of a news story where it's like, RFK is trying to get his daughter-in-law to run the CIA because he wants to get his hands on the files of JFK and his dad. And the CIA is like, dude, we have nothing to hide. Come check out the files. We'll even pick you up in a convertible. That's the joke. Ha ha ha. Like, but I wrote that and handed it in, but it's like, of course, Jimmy Fallon is not going to say that joke. No one is going to say that joke on television, on NBC or whatever. But it's like, okay, I can just, for a week, I can slip this into my stand-up for fun. I'll find a way. And it's like, so I get to keep some of that stuff,
I'm sorry. That's a deep cut, man.
Yeah, so it's like I get to write that type of stuff, and then be like, okay, I'm going to put it in this doc. But
you're like, man, Robby keeps slipping assassination jokes in here. Like, what?
I always have one of the things I love doing on a writing staff is like, I love jokes that are just for the staff, that this is absolutely not going to get picked. It's not going to go anywhere, but everyone should at least get to like a genuine chuckle for the day from something, that like won't make the show. But
yeah, because like you don't have to answer this if you don't want to. Like, you don't like have like, oh, okay, we need 2 Robby jokes, 2, this person jokes, to this like a day. It's just like everyone write their stuff.
It's like everyone, basically, it's like you come in and there's already someone's pulled like 40 news headlines.
Yeah.
And then from 9 to 11, you just bang jokes on them, as many as you can. At 11, those get reviewed, and the ones that are everything goes into one doc ultimately. And the ones that are like chosen by the head writer go to Fallon, and Fallon is like, yes, no, I'm more on this topic. So then you get a new like round of headlines and the ones you have to focus in on. And that's kind of from like 11 to 1. And that same process happens again. And then from 1 to 3, it's like, now we're narrowed in. We know exactly what the topics are going to be. Go, go, go. So it's like on any given day, you end up writing like 75 to 100 jokes. It's really intense.
Oh my God.
They're not all great,
Yeah,
but
sure.
You're just, but everything ends up going into one doc, really. So there's not as much of like, oh, how many did you contribute? It's just like you want at the end of the day for there to be enough jokes for a good monologue.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, before we wrap, this has been great, by the way. Is there anything you want to like add or mention or discuss that I haven't brought up at all?
No, I mean, now that I'm like writing on the show, I'm not really on the road as much. I will be in Seattle at Comedy Bar February 14th, 15th, Valentine's Day weekend. Me and my wife will be there co-headlining together. That should be a fun one. And if you're in the city, I'm at the Cellar, all the time, or New York Comedy Club a lot as well.
Do you have, I don't know if you have a site, but I'll link the stuff in the notes and all that.
Yeah, just my name, Robby Slowik, ROBBYSLOWIK, .com, and I'm on Instagram and TikTok, and not really on Twitter so much anymore, but on Blue Sky and all of those things.
Well, Robby, thank you so much. It was great to meet you, and thanks again, man.
I'm so glad we got to do this. Thank you, man.
Yeah, thanks.
You've been listening to Blammo. Our show is produced by Blammo Media. We're edited by Amar Lowell, and our theme music, as always, by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. If you like what you heard, you know the drill. Share the pod with a friend. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars or thumbs up on whatever other thing you're listening to us on, whether it's Dingledorp or Bing Bong, whatever it's called. But you can also follow us on Instagram for all the hot content. If you want to talk to us and give us your hot take, we'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email at info@blamopod.com. Last but not least, super, ultra important, if I had a air horn, I would press it right now. You got to come and join us over on Patreon, because the fun never stops over there. Look, the live show, the free show, whatever you want to call this, we take breaks here and there, but Patreon, it never stops. And we also got exclusive shows like Die Workwear, hosted by Derek Guy and Peter Zotolo, and the Triple J Show, hosted by yours truly with John Moy and Gene DeLeon. There's just a ton of stuff over there. So check it out at patreon.com/Blammo. If not, no worries. We got hundreds and hundreds of free episodes in the feed, and more to come. So we will see you all soon.